Hello, educators of Virginia, and welcome to another episode of Deeper Insights. It is an honor and a privilege to sit down today to talk with Patrick Hausammann, who is the Supervisor of Instructional Technology for Clark County. He also serves as an instructional technology resource teacher, and he's the coordinator for Clark County's new teacher program. A lot of hats he wears. Additionally, Patrick is also a 2019 ASCD emerging leader. It is my privilege to sit down and chat a little bit about instructional technology with you today, Patrick. So welcome. How are you?
Thank you. It's great to be here. It's a good day. It's finally not raining the last couple of days, so some sunshine coming in the window, and it's a good Friday in Clark County so far.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Patrick. And so, where we are with all the things going on around us, within our schools, outside our schools, it's been quite an adventure, so to speak, over the past 2.5 years. And there's a lot of excitement going into the 2022-2023 school year. So, with all that in mind, when I ask how you are, I mean it. And our listeners have come accustomed to me making sure that I give you the chance to be your authentic self so that we can build a relationship with you. So, like, how are you showing up this morning?
I would say it's still definitely good, but I would definitely there's some tiredness there because it is the beginning of the school year. We're a few weeks in, and I'm a dad of a 7-month-old, so combining those things, it's definitely a tired morning, but it's still a good morning. I'm loving the things that I'm hearing out and about in the schools, and as much as I didn't like the phrase before, kind of our return to normal this year is just feeling a little more normal and not like the cliche that it felt like maybe last year when we heard that we're going to get back to normal, it's going to be a normal year. This year feels more that way, and it's a really positive thing to know that and walk through the schools and kind of feel that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment. I mean, first of all, belated congratulations on being a dad of the 7-month-old. I could definitely relate. But something you just said, extremely interesting because last year was hard, man. Last year was tough to be in schools. It was tough to be an educator in a classroom. It was tough to be an educator in a school because it wasn't anywhere near anything that we would classify as normal. And I myself was one of those. Let's stay away from this. Return to normal. Let's stay away from this. Let's get back to normal. Like I was one of those. But after experiencing 21, 22, oh my goodness, there is some normalcy that would be very welcome in a whole lot of places so that we could just get our bearings and maybe move for once and for once move beyond just being in survival mode
Mhm.
constantly. And so I so look forward for our educators in our schools and for leaders like you who are able to move beyond survival mode. So thank you for that reminder. That it's okay to want some normal. Like that's okay.
Mhm.
It's not a taboo word. But anyway, speaking of all of those things, speaking of the past 2.5 years, I'm interested to hear from you, like with your role. How was your role impacted by the pandemic? How were you able to adjust? And maybe we'll get into some lessons learned. But really, I'd like to hear um, how your role was impacted by the pandemic and how you adjusted.
Yeah, I would say that almost instantly, as far as that Friday the 13th when things started, then meetings scrambling started to start as far as how can we make this thing happen? If we're closed down and we're possibly going to be for a while, how can we switch this to allowing education to still happen in some way? And as you know, and as everybody else listening probably knows, anybody instructional technology within a school division was instantly called on to
Yeah.
how do we make this thing happen? How does this work? How much time do you need with a teacher to do training? How much time do you need to just help make this thing happen? And one of the things that worked really well for us from the very beginning, and it helped that we were small, is I got brought into those conversations at the division level and really helped start to kind of plan some things. And we gave our teachers a little bit of grace as far as some time to kind of adjust and get into a new normal. But really, it was just instantly plunged into the deep end of the pool of trying to figure out how to make it work and starting to structure trainings. What do we need to purchase to make something like this happen? Because we got into all kinds of things as far as what tech do we need on the software side, but then what about the hardware side? If a teacher's going to have potentially kids in the room and at home, how do we get audio that's going to work as they move around the room? Are we going to lock them into one spot in the room? So there was a lot of how does this work, but then how does this work well, or can it work well? And just constantly kind of evolving and reaching out to teachers. Hey, can you try this thing? Because we don't know if it'll work because we've never done this before. And people being good about that kind of stuff and really pulling together. But ultimately, it was just that launch straight into the deep end and then trying to figure it out as far as how do we make it work.
Yeah, I almost God, you took me back, man. I haven't thought about 2021 as much as I've thought about 21, 22 recently. Just 21, 22 was so difficult and there was so much going on. Gosh, it was difficult because 2021 we thought that that was the hardest year ever. Like asking teachers to do the dual audience teaching with some kids in the
Mm.
room and some kids online, like, oh my gosh, what an impossible lift. I mean, the first impossible lift was transforming classrooms into the digital space. The next impossible ask was dual audience and concurrent teaching. And then 21, 22 came around. So man, you took me back. So talk to me real quick, if you don't mind. Talk to us about some lessons that you learned that you're keeping with you and your toolbox. Just some lessons that you learned.
Yeah, so as we carried that forward into last year and even coming into this year, some of the positives that we kind of took out and like the lessons that we really want to go with is keeping a focus on a number of things, but one of those is on equity. And speaking really on the tech side, there was a big focus launched into as far as how do we get everybody access at home?
Yeah.
And a lot of divisions struggled. We struggled in some places. There's no real way to get connectivity. Either there's no high speed there, or there's too many trees for a satellite connection to work. Cell phones don't work, so you can't do a hotspot. So that focus on kind of getting everybody on a level playing field was something that I really loved seeing, and all the people trying to come up with creative ways to make connections there happen. So I love the fact that that's continued forward. We have a broadband initiative in Clark that really got a bit of a push there. So trying to figure out how do we get that kind of last mile of cable, as they say, to those students so they can connect. And on our staff side, one of the things that we really liked, and it's been a little bit of a struggle keeping it as well as it was when we were closed, when we were going through that time, just because time seems to be in such short supply. But it's the increased in collaboration that we had, both between staff on different teams, staff between different schools, our admin team really coming together to troubleshoot things and try and work together. And then also that collaboration home when we were closed and when we were closed and then not closed, kids in class, kids not in class. As we went through all of that goodness and the speed that last year seemed to hit us with, having that increased communication really helped across the board, and not just calling home on those negative things, but those positive calls home and things like that. Just checking in, maybe not even on the academic side, but just how are things going? Like, we know this is a rough thing. We just want to see how everything's going. What can we do to help out? And there's a number of other things that kind of really helped. But the last thing I'll touch on as far as tech wise for us is the last few years, we've really tried to push to a lot of choice in our professional development because we wanted it to mirror what we ask our teachers to do. Even when we were going through the crazy times, we're telling you it's going to work a lot better if the students have some choice, have some agency in their learning. And then we took a deep look at what we were offering to teachers in our different programs, and there wasn't as much as we thought there was. So our PD day at the beginning of the year is now completely choice. We have about 40 different options throughout the day, and teachers choose what they want. And then we can do follow-up one-on-one stuff if we need to. But I think a lot of times we need to think of leaders as leaders of how can we mirror what we're asking our teachers to do.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. Those are some really great takeaways from lessons learned, but also things that can carry forward and continue on. That what you talked about there, leadership and collaboration and equity. And my goodness, did the pandemic really expose where our equity gaps were? So I appreciate those takeaways. Really stand the test of time. I don't see anything ever coming forward in the future in 5 years or 50 years that strong leadership, great collaboration, and a focus on equity wouldn't be three
Mhm.
tremendous priorities. So I appreciate that. So one of the things that is important to you as a supervisor of instructional technology and an ITRT is differentiating between technology use and technology integration. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we think about technology, we see it used throughout schools in a variety of different ways. And when I say use, what I mean is we've gone through a lot of our core curriculum. We've taught it the way maybe we're used to, the way we always have, even maybe a slightly new way. But then we hit the end and maybe it didn't snow as much in that chunk of time. And we have a little pocket of time at the end. Let's call the ITRT. Let's do a project. Let's do kind of an icing on the cake type of thing. And that's where we see it really, for me, a little bit too much of the technology use where it's just an added bonus thing for kids. It's a time filler. They love it, they enjoy using it, they come up with some great things, but it's more of a one-off type of thing. And for me, it's way more powerful for both the teachers and the students if we can switch more towards a technology integration where as early as possible you're starting to do maybe smaller activities, not full-blown projects, but the tech is part of what you teach with during your lessons. And maybe it does dovetail into a project towards the end, but those students are constantly exposed to even little pieces and then they're building upon it. So that efficacy is growing as they go throughout a week, throughout a 9 weeks, throughout a semester, so that as you go through, you have a lot less teaching content and tech at the same time. Students instantly think if they have a question, oh, I can check this here, I can do this thing, or how do I do this thing in this technology? I probably already know it because I've been using it a lot versus just coming in towards the end, using it. And then we all know the adage of if you don't use it, you forget it, or if you don't use it, you lose it. When we do it just a little bit and then 5 weeks later we come back and hey, we're going to do this thing again. I wouldn't remember most of it either. And it's a hard thing to ask our students to pull that back from something they haven't used much. And it's really hard to build that agency and start turning some learning over to them when they're constantly doing double learning at the same time too.
Yeah. That's I appreciate that. And one of the things you talked about is the student's role in that work and the differentiation between use and integration. Can you talk to us about what it means to, once we move beyond use and that add-on at the end, then we get into that integration piece and really using it to enhance instruction, to supplement
Mhm.
and extend instruction, and to really be able to differentiate instruction as a tool. Um, what does student agency look like within instructional technology, and how do we empower students to become, I guess, kind of the owners
Mhm.
of the technology?
I would say it twofold for me as far as how it dovetails with tech. One of those is using different technologies to open new opportunities and enhance lessons. So you want to look for those things that add something to the lesson. Not every lesson fits with tech, and that's something a lot of our teachers, when I say that, like, well, you're the tech guy, what do you mean? Tech is not always the best answer. There's no silver bullet, but if it fits and it adds something, if it opens an opportunity, if it provides an avenue towards creativity, absolutely use it and work it in. And then the second way that it dovetails really nicely is the way that you could package lessons for students. And that comes into things like hyperdocs and choose your own adventure type activities, even digital breakouts or things like the grid method. Ways that you can use technology to really track and kind of monitor that progress as students work through and give them everything they need from that hook at the beginning all the way through an enrichment activity at the end, all packaged in one place that they can work through. But at the same time, they have ways to throw up flags to you to say, hey, I need help, or I have a question. I can keep rolling, but check in with me at some point. So you can really turn it over really at whatever level you're comfortable with. And the one side note there that I'll say too is we have to be cautious about how much we launch to students right away. Because depending on how their lessons, how their teachers have been going up through, if we hit them with a hyperdoc and be like, here it is, you're on your own, lead your own learning, and they've not been exposed to those things and they haven't had that much choice before, it's almost going to be a paralysis by choice. And I don't know which avenue to go because I've always been told, do this thing, here's your rubric, this is how you get an A. When you really turn it over and you really let students lead learning, you want to scaffold that in so you know that they're comfortable with things. Maybe not 5 choices at the beginning, maybe it's just a couple. And then you gradually work them into it so that that comfort is there to really take charge and lead their learning and have that agency that you want to see.
And what do you think is really that balance? Because you know, as a teacher, it quite some time ago, I won't say how long ago, but as a teacher, but also working with teachers, there's a fine balance between instructional time used to teach kids tools so that they can take them over, and
Mhm.
instructional time for, you know, the content, the curricular objectives I'm responsible for. So what do you think about, and how do you work with teachers, and how do you just think about that for yourself, the balance between the instruction around how the use and the integration of the tool, especially
Mhm.
empowering students, and then also that the balance of the curricular objectives that we're responsible for?
So one of the biggest things that we always tell our teachers is anytime you're thinking about using tech, you want to integrate something, you want to open a new door for students that you don't think was there before. You never start with the tech tool or that thing that you want to do. You always are coming back to those lesson objectives and those core content things you need to hit. You're starting with that first and crafting that kind of great lesson, how you're going to deliver it, how those things might happen. Then, as you get that idea, and maybe even the tech person is still there collaborating, because most of us as ITRTs have been teachers before. We don't necessarily start as an ITRT. A lot of times we start as a teacher, work our way in. So we're certified teachers normally with some experience too. But you start that collaboration part early. You have that mission, that place you want to get to. Then you think about, okay, we know these different things. How could this be enhanced by a technology component? And on that, almost on that backside, you're starting to then bring in and think about technology, but it's never really the first thing. And if you're integrating technology as you go through, you should have students that have some of that efficacy, some of that knowledge of how it works as you're getting there. But you want to start early in the year with those little tasks, those little things they can do. For instance, if you're using like an LMS like Classroom or Canvas or something like that, even if you're down in lower grades, maybe you're not launching them instantly into doing activities and reading online and doing all kinds of different things. Maybe their first thing is to sign in and they're going to do their lunch count. They're just getting in, getting exposed. And then you're gradually increasing a few more things. And then as you start to get towards wanting to kind of turn things over more, you do that gradual scaffold until you're at a comfort level where you know your students aren't struggling too much. There's that fine line there as well, as far as how much is a productive struggle and how much is you're kind of losing kids and they're shutting down. Because we want to challenge them, of course, but we don't want to put too much on them. So you want to do a constant kind of feeling out with the kids to know when you can add more, when it's good time for the next level to kick in.
So, from your perspective, is it important for the teacher to master the tool before they put it in front of kids?
Not at all.
Okay.
For me, and I actually legitimately hate the term digital native because I think it puts a lot of our students at a disadvantage. Just because of when you're born doesn't necessarily mean you're better at a tech thing.
Mm.
I know a lot of people that are older than me that are awesome at tech stuff, and it not necessarily something you're born into. It's a different way of learning how to use different things. Especially like a student could be a whiz at different things on TikTok and doing different things, but do they know how to actually put a great presentation together or edit a video together because they've done a short or they've done a reel or something on Instagram? It's not necessarily a direct transition over. So I think it's something where any teacher that if I'm going to use something, I want at least a passing knowledge of it in my classroom. I want to know how to get started and play with it. But I also want to get to a point where I'm comfortable letting students kind of explore it a little bit and teach me some of the things as well. In some of my classes, when I was teaching a project lead the way class in automation and design, I didn't know that program as well as I would have loved to when I started. But I developed a few projects that were kind of little bonus things that would teach the students some of the skills they needed, but just let them make their name in 3D and kind of extrude it out. And I just be like, this is what I know how to do. One of your challenges is to find something I don't know how to do and teach us about it and kind of turn some of that over and empower them to explore a little bit. And I know with time constraints, it's hard to have that time, but if you can, that time to explore is when they discover those parts of those tools where you're like, yeah, I had no idea it could do that. That's awesome.
Well, and from that extends a greater use of the tool for what you're trying to get at anyways, and I appreciate that. So from what I hear you say, that too is a balance. So not just
Mhm.
balancing, instructional time for the tool and instructional time for the curricular objectives, but also balancing a teacher's expertise with a tool
Mhm.
versus, hey, I know just enough to kind of say let's go for it.
Mhm.
um how do you, as a supervisor of instructional technology, how do you help teachers let go of that need to be the expert in the room? Like, is there any encouragement, or is there any just like,
Mhm.
or is it like Obi-Wan Kenobi, let go of your feelings, Luke? Just how do you help teachers get through that?
I would say it's a twofold thing for me. One of them is just being human. When I do trainings, when I do stuff with teachers, if I don't know something, I'm the first one to be like, "That's a good question. I have no idea."
Yeah.
And at first, when people are first getting to know me, we have new staff. They're like, "Wait, you're the tech guy, and you don't? I've never even seen this tool before, but I can tell you, I'm willing to dive into it and push every
Yeah.
possible thing I can and see if I can break it." And I'll try and explore it and I'll do some of that work for you. So I know your time is precious and it might be hard for you to have the time to dive in and push all the things. I'll do that for you. I'll see what I can do and figure it out. But just showing that and showing empathy so that they know like I too, I'm new at this too. But let's jump in, let's look at it together, see what we can do. And probably one of the most impactful things I've seen from the building level administrator side or from somebody in my role is just giving people the permission to fail and know that it's not going to impact them in a negative way.
Yeah.
One of our admins last year or the year before said to staff routinely, I want you to try new things, whether it's tech, whether it's a new instructional technique, whatever it is, I want you to try new things. And the only negative thing that could possibly happen is if you don't kind of learn and grow from your failures and you keep trying the same thing that keeps failing, you might get dinged for it eventually. But if you try that new thing and then you learn from it and you grow and you show that kind of growth mindset we again are encouraging our students to have, you're never going to get dinged for trying something new. Even if it's your formal evaluation, the lesson bombs, we're going to talk about it. We're going to unpack it. We're going to grow from it. And it's not going to hit you hard like you think it might be. Try those new things, open those new opportunities for students, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, I appreciate that concept of failing forward, and I want to just, if we can, I want to pull out a point that you made, because I think as you were saying it, I just thought about how it applies to all levels, not just teachers in the classroom integrating technology. That idea of, I don't know. Let's find out together. Like,
Mhm.
there's a lot that we all in all roles in all walks of life can learn from that, as parents, as leaders, as government officials, as, I mean, you name it. I don't know. Let's figure it out together. That obsessive need to be the expert and to have all the answers because somebody came to ask you. It is okay to say I don't know, and then you follow that up with let's figure it out together. I appreciate that concept so much, Patrick. So I'm so glad that came up because you made me think about how powerful that is, at a much broader sense than just integrating technology in the classroom. So I appreciate that. I mean, I can't believe we're already, I mean, we're almost at 30 minutes, Patrick. Man, what a great conversation. But I want to give you a chance because our audience is always looking for the tangible takeaway. And you dropped a couple nuggets in there. I want to give you a chance, and it's the recommendation question. It's the, hey, what do you recommend for teachers and leaders? Because we're really talking to two audiences here. What are your recommendations when it comes to integrating technology at a level that you're talking about, as opposed to just the use and the add-on and the extra, nice to have? So what would be a recommendation that you would give us?
I would say for the admin, kind of the leader side of things, twofold. Number one, encourage that growth mindset and model it in front of your staff. Don't be afraid to be kind of human in front of them. And on the other side, model that tech use. If you're talking about tech integration and different things like that, then you need to be doing some of that within your lessons too. If you talk about dynamic presentations and interactive things, and you come with the like 1980s PowerPoint and fill your slides with text and hit staff with that for an hour, you're sending a message, whether you know it or not. You're sending a pretty strong one on the technology front. So be open to new tools, different tools, and show some of those things you want to see. And on the teacher side, I would say give yourself some grace. Number one, try some new things, and don't hit yourself hard if it fails. Even if the lesson bombs, we teachers are masters of picking up the million balls that just fell on the floor, somehow getting them all, and then moving stuff forward. And connected to the side of teaching is, don't be afraid to start early with tech stuff. One of the most impactful lessons I've done with tech is with a fellow Virginia educator named Phil Strunk. And it's something we called Apps Days, where literally on like day 2 that Phil had students, we came together with a hyperdoc that had the 4 cool core tech tools that Phil thought he'd use throughout the year. And at no point was any of it graded. It was all relationship building questions like, what do you love to learn in history? What are you worried about in this class? What do you love to do outside of school? All these things that would provide rich conversations and rich relationships starting that year off. And on the flip side, we said, now put your answer in this tech tool. But on the other side of things, don't just do what you're used to. Poke every button and dive down every rabbit hole you can find, so you really know some of these things. And one of your ultimate goals in this is to maybe learn some of this tech, but try and build relationships with classmates too. Reply to them, connect with them. And not only did it help Phil not have to teach the tech later in the year, but then it started to funnel out through the school. And we had other teachers like, I told kids that we were going to learn Flipgrid, and I was prepared to do like 20 minutes on how to do it. And they're like, no,
No,
we
yeah.
got this. So and so knows it. They'll teach us. We're good. Just
Yeah.
give us the thing. And that was 20 minutes back in somebody's day. And in the world of teaching, if you can give 20 minutes to somebody, it's like finding that gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome, Patrick. Well, thank you so much. I want to give you, before we say goodbye, I want to give you an opportunity for our audience, if they needed to connect with you, if you said something that sparked an idea or inspired something, or maybe just somebody needs support and they're just in a place where they're not getting it. How can we connect with you, Patrick?
I always tell people, if you can remember PHAUS edu, PHAUS edu, if you put at Gmail after it, you have my email. If you put .com after it, you have website, and then at PHAUS edu is me on Twitter. Reach out any of those places. I'd be more than happy to connect, collaborate. And if you've been to any of my tech sessions at different conferences and things, and it stands for this too, I always say that my stuff comes with lifetime tech support. So if it's a question today, tomorrow, a few years from now, reach out. I'm here. I'll help out.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Thank you for your experience, your expertise, and insight. I had a wonderful time just kind of hanging out with you for a very short period of time, and learning from you. And I'm sure our guests will too. So everyone out there who's listening, thank you so much for tuning in to Deeper Insights, this episode with Patrick Hausammann.
Thank you. It's great to be here.